Hi, my name is Mirena Umizaj, CEO and founder of Mirena & Co. I want to welcome and thank you for joining me on the Heart of Law podcast as I broadcast from my home studio. I designed this podcast to stay connected with the legal community in the United States. I want to provide meaningful content for those who want to learn more from experienced lawyers and firms, how they think and operate, their legal practice, and our business. I want to know what drives them, what holds them back. How have their practices changed since the global pandemic? I want to provide a platform and space that is real and raw and honest. I'm humbled to be part of this community, so I want to showcase the inspiring people who function in our legal system, the folks with profound impact who help our industry evolve every day because of their passion and complete dedication. Before we dive in, remember you can find my podcast videos on my YouTube channel and on iTunes. Don't forget to subscribe. Welcome to the Heart of Law podcast. My name is Mirena Umizaj, founder and CEO of Mirena & Co., and I will be your host. My career connects me to attorneys and other professionals in the legal field, and I love what I do and the people that I work with. So since the global pandemic, we simply haven't been able to see each other. The best part about my friends in this community is that they are some of the smartest, most passionate, most adventurous, and unique people you will ever meet. I am not an attorney, but I have been working with personal injury, mass tort, class action law firms around the country of all sizes and shapes for a decade now. I look at the legal world both from the outside and the inside, and I'm personally fascinated with how the human element is serving as a launching pad for these attorneys and lawyers that they become and evolve in their careers. So the personal stories matter, the upbringing and the education and their values, how the career shapes the man or the woman, and how ultimately one contributes to their own personal evolution, but also their clients and society as a whole. So I'm launching this podcast to do what I really love, is learn more about the people that I interact with every single day. My guest today is a force of nature. His name is Joe Freed with Freed Goldberg out of Atlanta, Georgia. Joe specializes in trucking litigation. He's a former judge, has authored 2 books, and about to write a 3rd book, which we're going to get into in this conversation. And he has, quite the track record. Joe has over $1 billion in recoveries nationwide. And he's the co-founder of the Academy of Truck Accident Attorneys in the United States. So this is only the surface. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. It is a pleasure to have you as a guest in my podcast.
And it is a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited to see what you're going to do with this podcast. And I can't think of anybody better to delve into the inside and the inside of what we do better than you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I hope I can live up to your expectations and my own, but I am certainly excited to have you and have the conversations that we once would have over a drink or over dinner at the legal seminars that we would go. So my first question to you is, have you ever appeared as a cat in front of a judge before?
Well, I like to be first in the things that I do, but I have never been a cat. Now, if you challenge me for things like that, I do know how.
You do.
I was showing you before, I can be all kinds of things. I can be a clown head. I can be socially appropriate, but my favorite, and what I'm looking forward to, looking for an opportunity for this look.
Oh, I love that look. That's so you.
Yeah.
That's the inner Joe in you.
And if I'm feeling a certain way, it's this look. Another way is this look. But
Depends on the day. Well, look, as long as you're not doing it in front of a judge during a really serious litigation hearing, I think you'll be
That's when
fine.
you would want to. That's when you would want to do it. You have to bring some tension relieving humor to the table.
Yeah.
You know.
What did you think of that video? I mean, I cracked up. I probably saw the video 3 or 4 times and I laughed so hard because he was so innocent and so.
I think that's the funny part of it is if the guy would have tried to do it, wouldn't have been fun.
Right.
Like me doing what I just did. Yeah, that's not fun. That guy, that he couldn't fix the issue. And, I mean, for me as a lawyer, I'm sitting there looking at going, in another context, that could be me. That's just another way to have, your zipper down in front of the judge, or, something's not working right.
Yeah.
And it's one of those times when you're just reminded that no matter how much your preparation, how detailed and exacting your preparation, the universe gets in the way sometimes.
It
And
does.
sometimes if you're open to it, it's the best thing that can happen because
Right.
it kind of takes you off the pre-canned approach to whatever you're planning on doing.
Agreed. I think that guy has a future in Zoom somehow.
He's the kittycatlawyer.com now or something like that, right?
He's definitely a meme right now. So, on a more serious note, how has with these hearings and appearances over Zoom, how has your practice specifically changed since the global pandemic? How are you doing things differently?
Well, the biggest thing that's changed, I think, is the expectation and the ability for in-person, right? And so all of the changes I would talk about would stem from that, because in some ways, I think it's really been great, and in other ways, it's been not so great. And the parts that are, lean toward the great side is I've practiced in, I think, 40 or maybe even more than 40 states. And so before the pandemic, I was on airplanes every single week, and a lot of times 2 or 3 times in a week. And I got better over time at being able to shorten those trips and get back home, but I was gone an awful lot. And it takes all kinds of tolls on you when you're gone, on relationships, on your health, on your ability to schedule anything with any kind of normalcy. And so when everything started to move to virtual, I've stopped being on airplanes as much. And I still travel a little bit. There's some things that I've gone to live, but I have participated in everything but a full-blown trial. I mean, I've done depositions, I've done hearings, I've done different kinds of hearings, all kinds of meetings of various types. And it's not the same as being live by any stretch. It's not.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what do you think is
well, for
exactly
me,
missing?
I know you'll appreciate what I'm saying because I think you and I are alike in a sense that we both believe in sort of the energy that's going on in between people in an environment, and that's different. You miss, when you can be there in somebody's eyes and you can. I don't know how to describe it other than with the word energy.
Yeah.
That's not there, and so there's sincerity that is hard to convey to people. There's a lot of, when you do the kind of work that I do, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about, kind of that's very deeply human and sometimes very, very painful. It's different to be with someone on Zoom as opposed to when you can sit there, and sometimes it's not the words, it's not the look, it's not the expression, just simply being there beside somebody, feeling the energy of the situation. That if you're open from an intuitive perspective to what's going on, something magical happens. And so I think there's less of that. At the same time, when you factor in the cost associated. And I'm not talking about money, although you could certainly look at it money also. I'm talking about all those other costs, the the spontaneity in your life, the planning, the health issues, the relationship issues, the things you're going to miss by sitting around in airports waiting for airplanes. I'm at a point now where I'm saying, for most things, it's good enough. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And if you say, would you rather go back to the way it was before on those kind of things? No. I see moving forward from here, when we're fully and completely recovered from COVID, I think the world is still going to be left a different place than it was before. And I think it has to do with this expectation of in-person. I mean, it used to be, I never would have dreamt of being in front of most judges on a camera.
Right.
I would have felt like they would look differently at me, not think that I was less serious. I would have never imagined meeting a client for the first time, or having a client talk to me about the death of their child, or the struggle of what it's like to be in the wheelchair for the rest of their life, or what it's like to be a caretaker for someone who used to be brilliant, who is now brain injured. And to ask you to open up to me by Zoom, never would have. Now that has changed, because not necessarily because I feel good about doing that, but because that's the expectation. And the longer we keep doing this, the more that I think has forever changed.
Yeah, I think people sort of we have all together made a shift, and that shift has become the norm. And so now that we sort of accept it, it really feels organic in some way. It feels like people actually are even more available than they were before, because you could just hop on a Zoom meeting and, have the same outcome in some ways that you would if you took a flight to Miami Beach to meet with a group of lawyers for a case. So are you doing the new cases that come in? Are you meeting with the clients virtually, or are you? You are.
I met with a client. Now sometimes it's live as well. I've done some live, and I'm not. Maybe I should be more careful. I don't think I'm being irresponsible when it comes to COVID, but I'm not personally overly worried about it. I mean, I don't want to get anybody else sick. I certainly don't want to get sick. So I'm being careful in that regard if I'm meeting with people, especially if they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I give the clients the choice. So, I'm meeting with a new set of clients tomorrow. Very serious injury of a child case, and they asked, so can we just do it on Zoom? We've got a lot going on, and there were some vulnerable people, and I'm happy to do that. In my mind, I still have that there will come a time when I'll sit in the room with them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think even for me, because sort of my work follows the same patterns of your work, and I miss the human interaction. I miss that energy exchange and being able to be fully present with someone over dinner for 2 hours, or at an event where you're engaged and saying hello to so many people. There's a really cool frequency about that, right? It's just you're seeing, exchanging. People are coming from different walks of life, and it's like, oh my gosh, you see everybody there, and there's an excitement to it. I miss that. That is, as much as I've been doing other things, like I have gotten in better shape, and I'm eating better, and I'm meditating more, and I have more time with my kids. I love all of that. But I think a part of me is wondering, like, okay, when am I going to be free again? When can I travel again? So that's another thing I miss traveling and going places. I assume you're doing less of that in terms of personal travel or pleasure?
I am. It's a lot less, but I'm doing some. But I'm doing less, and I miss it. And I think you really nailed it. It's the idea of being fully present, which especially on Zoom now. Like I feel like I can be fully present with you on this because you and I are having this whatever you call this. Okay, but get on a Zoom thing and you got 8 boxes, and everybody's on at the same time, and it's people are struggling with when can I talk, I have to wait for somebody else to finish.
Right.
It's and there's snafus that are going on. Very, very difficult not to check out and go shopping a little bit. So I think in today's world where we're more and more challenged, I think, from an attention perspective anyway, because of technology. I wonder about that with something like Zoom, being able to be fully present without having, your email open on the sidelines, and checking it. And, it's just like, in some ways, like the old way this would come up is when, and I'm sure you probably had this situation, you're sitting trying to have a close conversation with somebody, and they're checking their phone every minute.
Yeah.
And it just pulls you out, pulls the whole thing out. Well, I think that there's more chance of that in this situation. There's just so many distractions that can happen.
There is. There's no doubt. I think my husband has a good expression. I don't know if it's his original expression, but he says, who knows what's good or bad, right? With every scenario or situation, who knows what's good or bad? And even in the scenarios where you think there's that essence is missing, that substance is missing, I think there is pros to everything. So we'll find out. I'm certainly interested to see how this evolves over time, because you're right. We're not going to go back to exactly how things were before.
Like your husband saying, I also would add to that, who gets to say what's good and bad?
Right.
Like who's the rule maker?
Right. But there is certainly so much mystery to be uncovered, right? About how everything works in the universe. You are a spiritual man. And I think part of why we connect is because we both have these conversations about what's beyond the veil, what is beyond the surface. This journey you're on, this journey we're all on, you've taken on quite the path, and it's not a straight path. It has been very, very challenging in some ways, personally and professionally, and you have stayed the course, and you have made some you've accomplished incredible things. You've hit some milestones that most people don't. So are you sort of fueling your journey in this lifetime with the depth that you have for what you think may be beyond? Are you trying to bridge the gap, so to speak, and try to uncover who you are and why you're here and what the purpose of it all is? Like, what goes through your mind sort of day to day as you become, you evolve as Joe Freed, so to speak?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. I appreciate hearing you say the accolades that I've had, and I don't really walk around feeling those accolades, to be honest with you. I feel like I'm still very much at the beginning of the journey, although I'm 54 years old, so I'm 54 years into the journey, and it feels like 154 years into the journey. And I think that the journey gets advanced by, unfortunately, painful things sometimes, like you suggested. But for me, I think in a lot of ways, my whole life has been about trying to figure out, kind of my place in the world, and why am I here, and what am I good for, and what's my purpose. I've struggled with depression. I've struggled with feelings of inadequacy. I've struggled with doubts about self-worth. I've struggled with all those things, and I don't think I'm alone. I used to. There was a time not that long ago that I never would have had the courage to admit that to you in a forum that other people would watch, let alone that it would just come out of my mouth. But the reason I can do it now is because I know that I'm not alone, and actually talking about these things helps me and it helps other people. Because somebody, in fact, 2 or 3 days ago, I was on a webinar, and somebody said, well, I'm always so impressed because you always have your stuff together. And I'm like, who are you talking about? Me? You're talking about me? I have my stuff together? You got to be kidding me. So I think,
you come across that way, certainly. I mean, you hold it very well together.
Well, look, I mean, what I said before is my truth. I felt very apart from other people. I was that person who, again, I know I'm not alone in this, who could feel very, very lonely in the middle of a room full of the people who I consider my closest friends. And I can still feel very alone. And I don't know if that even makes sense to some people.
Yeah.
But, I felt apart from an awful lot in my life as opposed to a part of. And so a lot of the things in my life have been trying to figure out where that came from, what part of that is true, is any of it true? I mean, and I happened into an experience of all things, if there's people who aren't lawyers, they'd say, how could something lawyer related ever change you? I happened into something called the Trial Lawyers College, where I was exposed to a branch of psychotherapy called psychodrama, which is a very powerful branch of experiential psychotherapy. I would say it's a very powerful. It's a terrible name for a very powerful thing. I hate the name psychodrama. You could call it psychotrauma, because you're going back in time, and you're finding these times in your life where you have really kind of agreed to certain things in your distant past when you didn't really have the faculties to do it, and you end up living a lie afterwards, but the lie controls your whole life. And so for me, a lot of those feelings that were really controlling my ability to communicate with people, connect with people, all that kind of stuff, I had to find where did those come from, and what parts of those were real, and what was real, and what was invented on top of it by me, and just felt as real for me. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
So before the Trial Lawyers College, you were still a successful lawyer. I mean, you were still resolving great cases with great outcomes. What changed? So what you're saying is when you attended Trial Lawyers College, which, by the way, for those who don't know, is a place where a lot of attorneys go. It's like boot camp, to really, learn about themselves and then evolve as humans, and then also as lawyers. And this is sort of what you went through. So what changed from the time that, you attended the Trial Lawyers College to, sort of before and after?
I would say just everything. It really, literally close to everything, because, what happened for me, I mean, before, when you were saying what changed before, as I was listening to you say that, I was like saying, man, you said you were successful before. I was living such a lie before. My whole life was just not, it was not honest. My whole life, honestly.
And it's to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, even to myself. I mean, I could not say the words to somebody I don't know as the answer to a question, because I felt like if I said that, people would reject me, and they would finally know that I'm a fraud and full of it. I mean, I would lie to exaggerate something when the truth would have been more than sufficient. But I felt so small that I felt like I needed to do that. And so what changed is first a process that allowed a safe place to unpack some of this stuff, which was the first thing that's necessary. Is you have to have a safe place to do this kind of work.
Right.
And so creating a safe place, and I take that concept into courtrooms now, which when you first walk in feel very sterile and scary.
Mm-hmm.
And my first order of business, one of my biggest purposes for jury selection, which most lawyers would tell you is about finding out, the biases of jurors. To me, the first order of business in jury selection is to create a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's scary to walk into a courtroom, even for a juror.
Right.
It's foreign ground. It's scary for everybody. It's scary for the lawyer. They may not admit it, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what I learned is that vulnerability, the willingness, the courage to be vulnerable, what happens when you exercise that courage is the opposite of what I thought would happen. I thought that I would be rejected, labeled,
Mm-hmm.
ostracized, pushed away. And what I found instead was people were drawn to that courage. They were drawn to, and what I started to realize is I'm like everybody else. I'm not as different as anybody. Everybody struggles with this stuff. Everybody feels apart from. Everybody has a little bit of imposter syndrome in them where they think that if you just knew this about me, man, you'd never even talk to me.
But why do you think this is not a conversation that we have? Not to disconnect from what you're saying, because I want to tie this all together in a way that makes sense. But this is so true. It resonates with me. I've gone through it. I go through it sometimes. I'm always working on it. It seems
Sure.
like it's the thing that takes the most attention and energy from me, because I want to move beyond those things that hold me back, that make me feel limited.
Sure.
Why do you think this is not a conversation that we can have more openly and without judgment? And there are so many filters everywhere, and trying to be politically correct and trying to appear one way and really be another way. Why isn't there like signs in our society, in our justice system, in our education system to make this okay, make these safe spaces so that people can be open and be themselves? Do you see any burdens that maybe society may be blind to? Or have we not evolved enough to be able to make this a normal conversation? Or I don't know, what's your thought there?
I struggle with it like you are, because I think once you see this and you see it enough to where you accept the idea that, wait a minute, there's another way.
Mhm. It's easier.
And you go, oh my gosh. And then, I mean, what happens, Trial Lawyers College is going through a lot of struggle right now, kind of re-evolving. I won't get into all the details of that.
Yeah.
But people become junkies, lawyers become junkies to go to this because it's so incredibly real. It's so human.
Well, it's like sobering up, isn't it?
It is, but there's also just something that is just, people are just drawn to human. I mean, why do you, if you ever gotten stuck watching a cooking show, you ever watched it? Like,
Of course.
Cooking show, and you're going, what the hell I mean, at some point you step out and you go, I just spent 30 minutes watching somebody boil some freaking water and take a pre-canned something out of the oven that they had already made. And what the hell? Why can you not walk away from the cooking channel?
Mm-hmm.
I think it has something to do with the same thing we're talking about. It's as crazy as it sounds. There should be nothing profound about that cooking channel,
Right.
but there's something innately human about it. So you can't walk away. Why did people get hooked on soap operas?
Yeah.
Because there was something innately human about that
Jerry Springer.
The relationships that were happening, as messed up as they were, you couldn't leave because of that. So I think all of this has something to do with something to, in common.
Yeah.
With what we're talking about. There's a huge void for
Yeah.
most people in finding things that are truly human. And when they see it, I think it's why people end up getting sucked into cults sometimes, because they finally feel that kind of a connection. And they haven't ever felt that before. And it feels so intensely real and so drawing that they get sucked into it. So these powers can be used for good or for evil. And I mean, a big part of my life is checking in with myself to make sure that I'm using the things that I've learned, which I think give me certain advantages as a lawyer. Frankly, I believe that. But
So share a little bit. I wanna unlock the secrets, right? Because I think a lot of lawyers probably watching this want to know what more specifically you do. What is the work that you do on yourself? So, you wake up in the morning. Do you take time to yourself in the morning to recalibrate? Do you have you're very religious about your calendar, I assume, with everything that's
you
put
give
on
me
there.
so much credit I don't deserve right now. It's unbelievable. No, I want to be that guy who just described, who has, the extremely ordered existence. And
That doesn't exist. I mean, I just want
some
to
people are great at it. Some people are really, really good at it. I mean, for me, what I do is I make deals with myself all the time. Is what I'm doing. Constantly negotiating with myself but I have done really well over the course of the last number of years working on being vulnerable. And that's one of the biggest things. And when I mess up, I try to recognize that early. If I'm trying to live, I mean, I've spent the last, I went to Travelers College in 2002. I was exposed to it the first time in 2001. And I was asked onto the faculty in 2005. And somewhere around 2004, just before I went on the faculty, I was struggling with lots of things in my life. I was struggling with my marriage. I was struggling with my relationship with my kids, my relationship with God, my relationship with myself, my relationship with my parents. And somewhere around that time, and I remember exactly where I was because it was a conscious moment in my life, I made a decision to do something different. And it's going to sound funny to say this, but I made a decision to start to live my life honestly. And I know that sounds horrible to say, but
sounds very human to me.
well, what my commitment to myself was that I was going to start to live my life honestly, whether it served me or didn't serve me. And went through a period of time where systematically I was going through my life and cleaning things up. And it was almost like maybe what you would go through if you've ever, people who've had experience with addiction and going through your 12-step programs and things where you're going through, your life inventory. I went through a process where I was cleaning up relationships. I was cleaning up things that I had done, just getting to a place of honesty. And that still continues to be a big part of my life's journey, is to be honest. And when I screwed up, which I do, because I think, most humans, maybe all humans, would have a hard time with that. But I try to recognize it as quickly as I can. I try to address it as fully and completely as I can, without guarding it, without trying to protect myself in the process. And
so how does this translate into your cases, into what you take on? Because there's obviously you're working on you, and that's a never-ending work. There's one moment of recognition. Okay, I'm acknowledging that I have to live honestly, and this life is worth living, and so I'm going to do my best to enjoy this, and learn whatever I need to learn. But then the second thing is you have a full-time job that requires your entire attention, and it's very expensive. I call it expensive energy, right? Because you have to be creative, you have to be everything that a lawyer needs to be to put a case together, to work up a case. And it takes emotion, and it takes logic, and it takes creativity. So how do you muster to stay focused in your work and be so good at what you do while you're still working on job?
Well, I think my cases have given me many opportunities to continue to work on me, because I see myself in my cases. You know, I don't really believe in coincidence. I think that the cases that I end up working on, I'm supposed to be working. And there's things for me, there are opportunities for me to learn humility. There are opportunities for me to learn about things if I'm open, if I try to stay open, if I am open. The question is, what am I here to learn? You know,
Right.
why am I the lawyer in this case? And if a lawyer is open to that, then it becomes a very, very different experience to represent somebody, because this is not just the client's case, it's our case. I know that sounds weird, because most lawyers would disagree with me and probably say, how dare you say it's your case? But it is. I mean, because I'm making lots of choices in how this is going to happen. But you know, at a very rudimentary level, I mean, jumping off of where we were before, you said, how does this translate into your world? Well, I believe that it translates very directly. I think that in litigation, despite what might seem apparent on at the surface level, I believe that the party with the most credibility at the end wins, almost invariably. Now, are there some exceptions to that? Maybe.
Right.
Undoubtedly, there's exceptions to everything. But you know, juries will acquit murderers if there's a good enough reason to do that, and if there's honesty and humility, and you know, and I'm not saying that that's great. Wow, the murderers got off. I'm not suggesting that, but
It happened.
but if credibility, if you believe my premise that the party with the most credibility at the end wins, then everything that happens in the case can be measured by the credibility meter. And if the leader in that courtroom for one side is not a credible human being, that means they're going to lose, right? So the idea of honesty that I said I'm going to start to live my life honestly, that doesn't, I don't get a pass when I walk through the doors to a deposition or a courtroom. It means if there's something really bad in my case, really terrible, I almost, you know, try not to say any bad words on your
It's okay. You can if you want.
But if there's really crappy things going on in the case, I have to own those. I have to ask myself honestly, should I still win this case with all this crap in here? And I mean, and why? Why should I win? And I have a saying with my lawyers who I teach. I say, how can they be 100% right and we still win?
Right.
Because it forces us to look at something that's more important than whatever the problem is, you know, in the case. So this concept of living honestly and bringing truly what I believe to be an integrity to this process is difficult. I'm the first one to say it's not easy, and you can find yourself sitting there and wrestling with ethical dilemmas about how honest. You know, you start playing lawyer games with yourself. Honest about this, or what does honesty require in this situation?
So you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole. Exactly. You know, when you got a client who, if you reveal something about, it might cost them the case.
Yeah.
You know about it. The other side doesn't know about it. Well, what does it mean if you've made a commitment that morning? And this is something I try to do every single day, consciously. Getting out of bed in the morning, I tell myself, Joe, I ask myself, Joe, are you ready to be the most credible human being in every room you walk into today? Yeah. That's what I ask myself. And sometimes I don't really want to answer.
Yeah.
I've got something on my mind that I know I'm going to have to face. I have to make that commitment to myself. And I wish I only had to make that commitment once and that I was a good enough, evolved enough human being to where it could stick. But I got to do it multiple times a day.
Right. Right. I do too. I have to check in. In fact, you know, since the pandemic that I've had a little bit more time to myself and have dedicated some time to personal development. it's become more and more the most sort of the most important thing, right? Is just to make sure that who I am every day is somebody that I like, somebody that I want to hang out with, because I'm with me all the time. And when I'm not exactly up to par or aligned, I feel off. I am not my best self. I don't close that deal, and I don't have the energy to go after something else that I want to, because something is pulling me back saying
Right.
you're off, right? And so I have to check in with myself, many times. Sometimes it can be during a meeting where I'm like, I need a minute. I'll be right back. And just to take a deep breath and sort of anchor myself, because I think we as people get so caught up with what's going on the outside, on the surface, that we forget to see what's underneath, what's within, what's underneath it all. And that reflects in every aspect of life. So you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to be a legal financial consultant to go through this journey. I think it's important to just raise awareness that if everybody just took some time and accountability to check in and see what's happening and what's influencing their emotions for the day, as you have a soccer game to go to, or you have a hearing to attend, I think it can really make it better. It doesn't hurt. So do you think people are scared to dig? Why do you think
I am and have been historically. But I think, yes, fear of rejection, fear of, because I'm telling you, until you expose yourself and enough times and find that the floor does not open up, you don't get swallowed by the jaws of hell, you don't get ostracized by your community and by the people who you care about, your peers don't look at you and reject you and whisper behind your back, which is all the things. That fear of rejection is so incredibly powerful. Anybody who's ever gone to high school knows what I'm talking about, right? I mean, you walk around high school constantly afraid you're going to be rejected. You're rejected for, and so lawyers and people in our field, you're putting yourself out all the time. And it's a public forum. You're in a courtroom, or you're in a deposition, but some peers are there, and they're looking at you. And how are you?
You think they're looking at you? They're focused on you.
It feels like they are.
Yeah.
And it feels like they'd like to hurt you. It feels like they would like you. They
want you to fail.
They want you to fail, and they want to get some good stuff on you.
Yeah.
Right? They want to be able to feed the gossip mill about you, right? I mean, human beings know what I'm talking about. So yeah, there's a lot of fear associated with it. But here's another thing that happens though. The more you do this work on yourself, I think the more you start to trust your intuition about other people. And so you can feel what's really going on for somebody else. There's an empathy, and I think women are probably naturally better at it than men, but even us lowly men can learn this if we do enough work. And it's the idea of really truly being present to what's really going on. And it's something. There's always parallel paths going on. There's always things are happening at different levels. And where are you tuned in? Are you tuned in? I mean, how many times have people listening to this, been in a situation where, you see something crystal clear going on. The person who's asking the question or interacting with somebody, they don't have a clue, right? Here's what's happening. Here's what's really going on for this person, right? So you learn to kind of listen with this third ear. And I think the third ear is kind of intuition. Maybe it's other things. But the more honest you learn how to be with yourself, I think the more honestly you can see what's going on with other folks. And maybe that's both directions. The more honestly you work on seeing what's really going on, as opposed to what you might want to see going on,
Yeah, and it's interesting because lawyers, in our culture at least, are defined as, or stigmatized or stereotyped to be these cold, calculated.
Trained that way. They're trained to keep an arm's distance, keep everything at arm's length.
Yeah, right.
It's trained.
So do you think that stereotype is accurate in general, and do you think anything has changed, or is this the same thing that new lawyers are being taught and is being carried on, like, or is there another way to look at law and practice law, or does everybody need to go to trial lawyers college to have one of these awakenings and sort of bring everything back to balance? I mean, I guess my question is, do you project the future to have honest and truthful lawyers, or is that stereotype just kind of set in stone for now?
I don't know. I think that the stereotype is pretty safe. I really do. And unfortunately, I think there is a growing awareness among people, but it's not just limited to lawyers. I mean, look at the way doctors are trained. You don't see a doctor crying bedside with their patient. And if you do, here's the interesting thing. To a doctor, that would feel like a fail somehow, like I'm not strong and I'm not together and I don't have my crap together and I'm a bad doctor. But to the humans in that room, they would love you. And it doesn't mean that your judgment is clouded. It just means that you've allowed yourself to feel as a human being. I mean, I cry with my clients. I'm that guy. I mean, I carry my clients around with me. They become a part of me. I hope in some ways I become a part of them. So I think that what you're talking about is endemic to sort of the human race. We are all scared little boys and girls struggling for our place in the world, struggling with our sense of belonging, with our sense of worthiness for everything from, am I worthy of love? Am I worthy of money? Am I worthy of success? Am I worthy of plug it in? And I think that's the human condition. So why should it not be true for lawyers or financial consultants or doctors or anything else in the world? I mean, we're all struggling with it.
Have you thought of incorporating some of this, raising the awareness at the legal seminars or webinars that you do? Is this something that comes up for you where you want to incorporate this and have these conversations more often with people?
I do it all the time. I'm doing it. I mean, we're doing this right now for this purpose. But I mean, I did an hour-long webinar earlier today with a trial lawyers organization in Texas. I was talking with them about these kinds of concepts. I mean, there's the surface level stuff about, you're going to handle a truck accident case. You need to have an understanding of these legal things, right? But you start talking about damages in a case, and you can make it very sterile. I mean, it can be, here's the prima facie case, here's the elements of this and that. That doesn't make anybody feel. I mean, if you want to get a big verdict, I mean, you think about what I do and what the people that you then are involved in the back end of these matters where you're helping people manage funds and all those kinds of things on the back end. And so you've seen how lawyers ask for money, and you hear people on listservs and they go, how much for the broken arm case and how much for the shoulder, shoulder that. I'm like, wait a minute, that's a human freaking being. Not every shoulder is the same. Tell me what's connected to that shoulder.
One of the things that would shock me in the beginning when I first started working in this business used to be, somebody would say, I have a great case right now.
Awesome, a death case. It was horrible. I mean, it was awesome. It was blood and guts. I'm like,
and they describe the injuries, and I'm awesome in the same sentence.
Right, and they're going like this at the same time, right? They're rubbing their hands together. Let me tell you about this great case. this guy got really messed up. Oh gosh, he's going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Go, oh my gosh, are you a human being? I mean, but even beyond that piece, I mean, how many lawyers do you know? And I know you know a lot. How many of them take the time to go and sit with their client and sit and not only with the client, but even not with the client, just take time and clear everything else and just try to feel their way into their client's existence. And you talk about just feel their way into the whole thing. And it's not just the client. I mean, I took a deposition, I think it was like last week. Well, it was last week. Now I'm looking at I took a deposition of a truck driver who's responsible for a terrible set of injuries. And, this guy looked a little bit like a meth head and didn't look like the nicest guy in the world when I started the deposition. But, I started the deposition instead of the way you would expect most lawyers to start the deposition. I started the deposition by looking at him and saying, I've been been preparing to take your deposition for a while. And over the last few days, I've really been struggling thinking what this must be like for you. And even last night, I was having a hard time sleeping last night. And I was thinking about, is he having a hard time sleeping right now? And so what's this been like for you? Objection. Objection, you're being a human being.
Right.
Objection, you're asking him to be a human being. And so, but here's what happened. 4 minutes into that deposition, whose witness was that?
Yours. Yeah.
I'm the first person who actually treated him like a human being and said, what's this like for you? Instead of, you better say this, you better not say this, you better, imagine what it's like I work on cases involving truck crashes with horrible, horrible outcomes. People are dead and maimed and all kinds of horrible things. And I spent a lot of time with my clients and thinking about them and figuring out how to talk about their injuries and figuring out how the hell you connect that up to money, which usually is a weird thing to connect up. I mean, you don't say I have $100 headache today, do you? I mean, except in the courtroom, right?
Right.
But how many times is the lawyer willing to sit there and say, oh, I really like that defendant. That defendant is a really nice guy, and he is struggling like crazy with being responsible for the maiming of this family. And can you make room for humanity in that without feeling like your humanity is going to diminish your case, your client's case? That's what the disconnect is. People in my field, in the field and you study, and you are such a part of, they think that it's a zero-sum game, that if I'm nice to the person on the other side, that diminishes my strength, diminishes my effectiveness, it diminishes my case, it makes me less than, it belittles my client. I totally disagree.
Me too. I mean, the most impactful lawyers that I have met that have made a personal impact on me are people who are very respectful to everyone, no matter what, no matter where, no matter how. And from the person that's an intern to a legal assistant to, an associate, it doesn't matter. They're the same person to everybody, and they're kind to everybody. I'm always trying to observe and learn, and these are people that truly inspire me, but they're also very much in touch with their emotions, and they're okay with it. And these are men and women, and they're the most effective attorneys that in our country today. So even though this sounds almost like we're having, it's cliche in some ways, just be a good person and everything is going to be okay. The truth is, it's very clouded, and then people do perceive kindness with weakness in the profession of law. And even when I am in front of clients and I'm speaking about money, I think people get very defensive when money comes up. People become very protective. And the truth is, the way I try to break the ice is to say that this is about you. I'm just here to help support you. This is about you. So no matter what the decision is, it's the right decision for you. It's the right decision for me. And that just breaks down all the barriers.
Well, but the thing is, some people say that they're full of crap. It's their sales pitch. And so that's why people are skeptical about it, is because they first have to say, is this person who's in front of me, is that really who they are, right? So with you, I've seen you work with people, and while you may say that, by the time those words have come out of your mouth, you have lived those words. And that's what's more important, is to be congruent. What they say is congruency. Don't tell me, show me.
Mm-hmm.
So when you demonstrate to somebody that they are more important than your sale, that's where credibility starts to happen. And that's the opposite of what you're taught in sales school.
Mm-hmm.
Work them. You're always selling. No, you're always either credible, you're always on display. And so it's like you said earlier, you're on a journey, but do you want to be the same person to everybody all the time?
Well, it's exhausting to not be the same person, because I've done it, right?
Wow, isn't that true? And yet we do it to ourselves all the time, but it's true. It's exhausting. You got to remember your lie.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You gotta remember, what did I say to so and so?
Right.
I get caught with that, whatever. But for some reason, it's part of the human existence, and I think, So I think you were saying before, what are the things that we do differently? And I think for me, I hope that people see me first and foremost as a good human being, and if I could be anything in front of a jury,
Mm-hmm.
I would rather the jury describe me at the end as he was a straight shooter. He was obvious to me that he cared about the client, and he cared about what we were doing, and he wanted the right thing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a pretty good lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, on the lawyer side, I don't know.
Yeah.
But boy, he cared about his people. And you just know that. You see brand new lawyers sometimes, they have zero skills.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I'd hate to be against them in a courtroom, because they've got this love affair with their client. They love them. They've got this love affair with justice.
Mm-hmm.
And it just oozes out of everything. They can't put a proper question together for a court. A court's going to objection sustained. You don't know how to ask a question. But you know what? Even that, you get up there and try to ask the question, get shut down a dozen times, and the jury's going to love them. And what's going to happen? The jury's going to fight for them. And I've seen it a million times that what happens in the courtroom is this tribe forms, this jury.
Yeah.
They form, and they can be totally from different walks of life. It doesn't matter to me what their politics are, what their ethnicity is, what their sexual preference is. None of that crap matters, because at the end of the day, we're humans. It matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but what matters more, what transcends all that is humanity. And if you can get to the truly compelling human story. I lived in the Middle East, as I know we've talked about it before. I lived in Israel as a child, and I was there through one of the wars. And I remember even as a little kid thinking, the image in my mind was that Israeli moms and Arab moms cry the same salty tears over the injuries and deaths and maimings of their children in these wars. And they come from ideologically maybe different beginnings, but at the end of the day, we are human. We bleed blood, we breathe oxygen and whatever else crap we put in our lungs. Some of us drink, some of us drink too much, some of us smoke too much, some of us do all kinds of other self-destructive things. But we all have emotions, and at the end of the day, that's where I think the power of lawyering happens, is if you can
being authentic, being
tap
real.
into that, tap into what makes us the same, not what makes us different. And now you're onto something.
Would you say, now that you're at this stage in your life, seasoned lawyer, father,
Old man.
you're not an old man. Would you say that it's 50% skill and 50% owning yourself and being authentic and knowing who you are and expressing that, you know, as best as you can, so that other people can see and hear you and perceive you as real and authentic? Like, is it,
You mean 50%, like 50% of success, is that? Or
just in the sense of being who you are today, do you think it's, you know, half and half in terms of skills as a lawyer, the technical side of practicing law, and then 50% the human?
I don't know how to break it up. I really don't, to be honest. But I think it's most important to be a good human. But when I say that, you do have to have certain basic skill sets. I think about, you know, some of the cases that I've been involved in, and because I've handled cases everywhere, I know nobody's law. Okay? So people always say, well, you know, did you do such and such with the law and such? I'm like, no, I didn't really know that. You know, or and what's the law and such? You know, I need a cheat sheet, because I'm, you know, what the law is here is going to be different than what the law is in the next state I'm in tomorrow. So I get people, I'm fortunate, I have great people who give me cheat sheets on the things I need to know. But none of those things really at the end of the day carry the day. Get me by a judge. So in my mind, I have to get by the judge. That's the law, because I have to meet certain criteria. But once I'm past that, it's all humanity. It's nothing. I'm not the guy who quotes chapter and verse law. I try to forget that at that point. I've got great, really smart people. I have lawyers, you know. I mean, I have a young man who is my associate. I call him my lawyer. You're my lawyer. Don't let me mess up as a lawyer, okay?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to be thinking about any of that stuff. What I'm going to be thinking about is, you know, for this person, this specific person, what's their life like, and how has it changed? Or what is, you know, sometimes I was talking earlier today about, you know, what's a case about? And so many lawyers say, well, a case is about what happened in the intersection. Was it the red car or the green car? Who had the red light? Who had the green light? Almost never is that what really carries the day. There's much more important things than that. I know that sounds weird, but that's the facts. You know, the only facts that I think matter are facts that carry an emotional content with them. And I believe at this point in my development, I don't believe that people make decisions based on facts. I think that people make decisions based on emotion, and they backfill whatever facts they need to justify their emotional decision. And I say it because I've seen it. I've been in cases where you try a case for a week or two, and at the end you talk to jurors and you wonder if they were in the same courtroom you were in for that week, right? And you know, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you get to, you know, but it's interesting because you get to talk to these people, you know, it's clients, and they've been through a lot of them through terrible circumstances, and now money is supposed to try to help put it together, right? And it's such an incomplete measure. It's important, but to me, at the end of the day, for my clients, there has to be money there, but it's something about the integrity that you have restored to their existence.
Is it the dignity that you give to that person in the process?
I think dignity is a huge part of it. I think about, I made an argument one time where I was talking about money, and I'm supposed to be talking, it was the death of a child, And I remember thinking, I'm supposed to tell these people to award a lot of money and how important it is to award a lot of money. And what I found myself saying to the jurors was, you know, no matter how much money you give or how little money you give, you know what mom is going to do? She's going to go back to her house when this is over. She's going to find the courage to open the door to her little girl's room that's still in exactly the same shape. The bed has not been made. It's been there for 4 years waiting for this trial. And she's going to fall, if she has the courage, she's going to fall under her little girl's bed and she's going to sniff the pillow. And then she's going to get up, and when she can breathe again, she's going to crawl over to the closet and open the closet and run her hand across the little ruffles on the little dresses that are in the closet. And not any freaking amount of money that you give her is going to change that. So what the hell are we doing here? And yet, at the same time, even though all of that is 100% true, you know what else is true? She needs to see a huge freaking number on this piece of paper representing the size of her loss. Because if she doesn't see that, then something's broken in the world forever. Right? So that was the argument, you know, and it's not about what a lot of lawyers end up doing and talking about, you know, whatever. I don't know. It bothers me sometimes.
I think, well, talking about money in cases, I mean, just in general, in your cases, I think at least personally, I've always felt if I'm in a mediation or even when I'm talking to clients about money after a tragedy like that, is it's almost insulting.
Hell yeah, it's blood money.
It's insulting, and if these people don't get enough, right? There's barely enough there, you know, and they've got a ton of debt and liens to pay off, and you know, the attorney fees are typically pretty significant too. And so at the end of the day, these people walk away, they don't have their dignity and they don't have money, and they're left with a broken life. And that is really, really hard. It's hard to consolidate and be at peace with that. I don't care to what capacity you are involved with the case, whether you're the lawyer or the paralegal or whoever. It's hard to see that because these are human beings going through real life struggles.
So why can't, you were saying, why can't we be honest in the rest of our lives? Why can't we be honest about this? Why can't my profession be honest about this? The answer is because we were taught to do it a certain way, and we're afraid that to do it any other way diminishes it, and people will, you know, not accept it.
Yeah.
And there are a number of lawyers, I'm not the only one, but there are a number of lawyers who are challenging that in the world, and they're, you know, saying, what is this case really about? You know, and you know, you think about, I represent a lot of people with brain injuries, and I also represent a lot of people with pain syndromes. And the defense a lot of times is kind of calling BS on the pain syndrome. So it's all about credibility. Is the person full of it? If they are, they shouldn't get any money. Or is it real? And so why not own them? Why not say, you know, if this is BS, then they shouldn't get any money. But if this is real, if every moment of their life, you know, if every moment of their life, I'm representing a person right now, 21 years old, and for the rest of his life, he's going to have pain and limitations. If that's true, then that's a huge freaking loss. I mean, when you think about it, you know, that's just huge. I mean, think about it, 21 and for the rest of your life. I mean, I think of the years since 21, I can barely remember 21. I've been past 21 for so long, you know. I know it's only been like 2 years, but us,
exactly.
People who young people who do podcasts with, who say, now that you're at this point in your life, they're not saying that because you're close.
I would not go back to being 21 because first of all, I was terrified of the world and insecure and confused. So I think I'm okay being older. I embrace being older, and I think
23 is much better.
I'm telling myself to be okay with aging. This is something I'm working on. Okay.
But look, for real though, I mean, when you say, so like, I'm turning this podcast on you a bit, but here's the truth. I mean, when you meet with somebody and you see a 17-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old young woman, I know a little bit about you. I'm not going to say all, things. It's for you to tell your story. So I'm not telling your story, but you know a little bit. You know a little bit about what might go through a young woman's mind. Maybe it's relationship issues. Maybe it's a child that's there. Maybe it's how they interacted with their family and their culture and their world and their spirituality and their whatever. But so do you bring that? Most people who are financial people will say, well, what the hell does that have to do with my job as a financial person? Oh my gosh, I'm there about dollars and cents and product sales. Really? I don't think so. I look at the world the other way. Those other things, those numbers and dollars and products, those are the excuses those are the excuses that took you to this person's life. Now, what are you going to do as the person who's lived life? What are you bringing to that person's existence? The other things are the excuse. It's nice. It's the opposite of the way we're trained. I'm the lawyer in the case, right? But no, really, being the lawyer was just an excuse to get me into their lives and to get them into my lives. We're there together for a reason. We have to struggle together. We have to figure out why we're together and what we're going to do together that's going to be, in my world, pleasing to God and helpful to the world at the end of the day.
And that's the ultimate service, right, to another.
Is there any other way to be?
Well, I think it's for the people who can't cross that line, it feels daunting because they still haven't dealt with their own emotions, their own life struggles. And it's hard to look at somebody else's problems when you can't handle your own, right? And so people can function within a job and say, this is my job, I'm just going to go and do my job, and then try to stay above water, right? And so I think for me, even learning the skill set of being in the profession and the career that I'm in, that was great. It was very helpful. It allowed me to talk about who I am and what I do. But ultimately, what has helped me as a person is to be open and see myself in the people that I am working with. Because when I'm helping them, I feel like I'm helping a part of me that's still very much like them. It's not completely, I haven't completely healed or I haven't completely transformed. I'm still, their struggle is a human struggle. It's my struggle. And it would be very ignorant to dismiss that. It would be very, it's what, in a way, it's like you're blind, you don't even know it's there.
I agree with everything you said. One thing I'm glad that you went further, because I was going to call you out and say, the way you're saying they haven't dealt with their stuff and therefore they can't. Well, that's just as true for me. Okay. I mean, I don't want anybody to think I've dealt with my stuff and I'm in this holier than anybody's place. I've dealt with my stuff just enough to know how much more stuff I have to deal with.
Right.
Okay? I mean, it's like, in psychodrama world, which I've now done, hundreds and I'm sure more than 1,000 hours of in my, my time. The saying is, you always have another psychodrama. There's always another one locked and loaded for you, ready to go. So there's layers to this, and I think it's a mistake to say I'm going to be better when X. That's not really the way it works. I mean, you meet the challenges that you're at the people who come into your life right where you are and right where they are. We don't get to choose, and we shouldn't be judging. I would say my first rule of persuasion, because I'm in the persuasion field and so are you. My first rule, and I try to remind myself all the time, is to meet people where they really are, not where I think they ought to be, not where they would be if they were just reasonably intelligent, if they just knew their stuff, but to truly meet them where they are without judgment about them. And only when I do that, and when I can really do that without the persuasion agenda poking its head in, when I can really truly meet them there and walk with them there for a little bit, then can I start to walk them towards somewhere else. But here's what you have to, if you do it all the way, here's the interesting thing that happens. You might get walked a different way too. You truly do what I say, and you give up the persuasion piece. You have to be open to the possibility of what you might learn that might change your impression as well.
Right. Well, certainly. I mean, the transformation is not a one-way street. It affects everybody involved, right? I mean, I think somebody that is lived enough, I think even somebody in their 20s understands that. Somebody young understands that. So if you were not a lawyer, what would you be?
I'd be a psychodramatist. It's not a hard call.
Okay.
I would, I think that people who I know who have dedicated their lives to being psychodramatists are among the most special people I've ever met in my life. They, one after another has shown themselves to me to be just more authentic than the next. I mean, they're just, people are going to think I'm a psychodrama junkie. I mean, I used to be, I think, more than I am now, but I got to do some last weekend for the first time in a little while by Zoom. That was interesting. And it worked. I mean, which was awesome. It's just psychodrama is intensely human, and I love the humanity of it. And it's what I get to do in my practice. I mean, in some ways, I'm doing psychodrama all the time. I mean, I'm going to be preparing a witness. I'm going to be preparing a client for deposition a little bit later this week. We're going to be doing psychodrama light. I mean, I'm not practicing psychotherapy, but I'm getting pretty close to the line, of it.
Yeah. Do you have a role model in the legal space, in the legal business?
I have, I have different people who I have a lot of respect for. I mean, Jerry Spence was one of my role models for a period of time, and he still is in some ways. I would not want to be Jerry Spence, but I have learned tremendous amounts from Jerry. There was a lawyer who was one of my mentors early in my career, who's now passed on. His name was Ben Williams. He was very, very influential on me. There's not a lawyer whose name is Josh Carton, who some people who are lawyers might know. He's a actor, director, producer from Hollywood, lives out in Santa Monica and does a lot of lawyer consulting work now.
How fitting.
He's an amazing person. I got to see him this past weekend, and I realized in watching him work this weekend how much of a debt of gratitude I owe to him for helping me with what I call perspective work, because it's all psychodrama and all this other stuff we've been talking about, I think to a large degree depends upon our ability to get out of our own perspective and to see the world through other perspectives. And so if you're a truck accident lawyer and all you can do is look at the world through the eyes of a truck accident lawyer, well, that's not going to take you very far. You bet. But what if you can learn to look at life through the eyes of a truck driver? And not any truck driver, but the one particular truck driver with all of the stuff that went into that guy's life and was going on in that guy's life. And how about a safety director? And how about each of the jurors who's going to decide the case? And everything for me is about checking out these different perspectives. So big part of my life. It's called role reversing, and I'm constantly role reversing. I role reversed this morning with my Doberman.
With your what?
My Doberman.
Oh, okay.
We were having a moment in each other's eyes, my Doberman and I. And I reversed roles with him, and I was trying to look at life through the eyes of my Doberman.
Yeah.
I saw this idiot standing there trying to talk to me in a language that I didn't understand. And I realized that was me. I was the idiot talking to the dog. But anyway,
So I want to go back to a question I asked earlier, because I think some people may really find it helpful, right? Is, let's say somebody really wants to break through and they want to be authentic in the courtroom, in their lives, with their clients. Where do they begin? How do they start? What are some of the first steps in terms of, opening the door?
That's a great question. I would point them still to Trial Lawyers College and some of the programs there, and try to find a local psychodrama group where they live. My studies of psychodrama, part of them have been in context of lawyering, but much of my studies of that were done in the same environments that therapists are going through to learn how to be psychodramatists. And there was, therapists and Joe, in there. So there's, but really, I think for me, the journey has been an effort to just understand the human animal of which I am one, right? So I've studied all kinds of things about how we learn, how we process information. I think neurolinguistic programming is fascinating. I don't buy into some of the hype, but I think there's a lot to it. I think a lot of sales books, frankly, that talk about persuasion, talk about rapport building, talk about mirroring, talk about those kind of things. They're fascinating to learn. And I think then using something like psychodrama or other types of experiential therapy, where you get to go back. A big premise of this kind of work is going back in your life and sort of systematically finding where certain things started for yourself. Where did you reach certain agreements in your life about yourself? About, am I smart? Am I dumb? Am I worthy? Am I not? How am I going to act? And challenging, you've made certain agreements for yourself at a time when you didn't have adult faculties. You were 6, 7 years old and you decided that you're responsible for your parents' divorce. Things like that when you're next thing you know, you're 50 years old and you're still living with that as a truth in your life when it's not, never has been. And so what psychodrama can do is help you find that, look at it, explore it, and let it go. And something magical happens. You suddenly are 50 years old and you're not controlled by this belief that you formed.
You get a lot of energy back, right? Because you spend so much energy on that same thing. You don't even know that you are. And the engine is running and you're spending so much. So I think when you process, the beauty of just therapy in general is that you're able to get some of that energy back and use it for something else.
You and I were looking at the 4 Agreements book before. Some of that kind of stuff is very, very much in line with what we're talking about, where you're looking at different structures that come about. You mentioned seat of the soul and that work when we were talking about it. And I think a lot of these things, if you boil them down to what are they doing, a lot of them are different ways to go back and analyze the beliefs that you have formed at different points in your life and accept it as true and live your life based on when they're probably not true. The truth is they're probably not true. But you accepted them as true, so they have the power of truth in your life. So.
I want to read something from this book, because this has also become a favorite book. And it goes right in line with what we're talking about. It's going to be brief. So we cannot see who we truly are. We cannot see that we are not free. That is why humans resist life. To be alive is the biggest fear humans have. Death is not the biggest fear we have. Our biggest fear is taking the risk to be alive. The risk to be alive and express what we really are. Doesn't that just say everything that we just talked about in one sentence?
That's, you know,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of people listening to this going, wow, these are some whacked out people.
That's okay. Here's the thing, the right people will tune into this, and those who don't find it relevant, it's not their time yet. So that's okay.
Well, and you know, I mean, you know, it's a lot of the things that I teach about in practicing law, and I've been doing a lot of teaching for a long time now,
Mhm.
is all about challenging the paradigms that we were taught. You know, so you go to law school and you get a certain kind of an education, and that's just like what we're talking about too, because then you're afraid to be who you really are as a lawyer, because you're only going to be the lawyer you were trained to be. You're going to not do things. You're going to do things one way because that's what you saw. That's what you accepted as the right way to do things.
But don't people go to law school because they think they're going to become somebody that can handle life, that can manage life better, that there's almost some safety net that comes with knowing that you're going to be a lawyer, and people go through law school and then they go into their jobs and it's not what they thought it would be. I meet a lot of lawyers that are unhappy in their profession.
Most are.
I mean, I feel like that there is an injustice from the onset for these young adults that go into law school with ideas that law school is going to be something and provide them with and help them transform or become somebody. And it's, you know, it's really smoke and mirrors.
Well, the law school education is not going to convert you into a better human being. It's just not. It's going to teach you a way of thinking through things. It's going to give you what you need to pass a big examination that gives you a license to then create something called the practice of law for yourself. And one of the beautiful things about practicing law is if you reclaim the freedom of choice, if you reject the paradigms that you were taught, at least in there, that they are the complete and only way, then you can start to put together something that's uniquely yours in the way you put this together. I mean, I mean, I'm sure there are other people who practice somewhat like me, but I bring all of this weird stuff that is Joe Freed together, you know, and you know, I mean, I've studied all these things like we talked about. I also have all my little fears, my little idiosyncrasies, you know, the holes in my logic, holes in my existence also play into it. The imperfections as much as the things that I think I've learned that are really good. Mm-hmm. All of that is uniquely mine. And so what I do, one of the things I do that I think is different, mm-hmm. is I'm not trying to be anybody else. There was a time when I did. I would like to be anybody else.
Right, right.
But now I've come to a point where I would be lying if I say I love myself, because I have to work. I work on that, and I know that sounds cliche, but
So
that's really,
so I get that.
But I've gotten to a place where I can more than tolerate myself, which is a better place than I've lived most of my life, where I can see that I have the ability to and have done some really good things for other people, and that feels good. And you know, but I'm not trying to be melodramatic in this. I mean, I feel you know, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I finally feel like I'm a pretty good lawyer, you know, and I'm proud of the way that I practice law, which is a very human way that works on honesty constantly, that owns problems openly and honestly, and that asks, I think, the right questions that are sometimes difficult and, you know, questions to ask. And that really is based upon this idea that if I just go out every day and just with the intent to do good in the universe, to do good for other people, that everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah. Things always work out. Yeah, I think this is really helpful. This is helpful for, I think, people in general, probably more specifically people in our field that are watching this podcast, because feeling determined and feeling optimistic and feeling confident and feeling fearful are normal emotions as we transition and evolve from one role to another. You're not just a lawyer, you are, a father or a brother or a son, and you have to play all these different roles, and you have to be able to accept that these emotions are part of your everyday life, that it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be something that comes easy. You have to work at it. And
You
I
don't
think
want it to be perfect. That's where you finally get to, is you come to the realization that the most powerful things in your existence are the things that hurt you the most. But those are in a weird way, the biggest gifts. They didn't feel like gifts. They're gifts you would have liked to give back and not have had. But truly, when you've experienced heart-wrenching pain, that prepares you for something that you couldn't ever do but for having experienced that. So if you bury it, you've buried an amazing treasure. So what you realize is you need imperfection. It's not a struggle for perfection. It's a struggle for honesty in the imperfection that matters.
being okay with it, being okay with the imperfection.
Well, even beyond that, like I was teaching jury selection this weekend. That selection of jurors for, people maybe not be lawyers. There's a process, obviously, of getting the jury in the box and the right jury. And, under my theory of jury selection, I need what other lawyers call the nightmare juror. If you meet that guy's the guy who's going to say, you're going to lose this case. I hate your case. I hate your client. I don't believe you. I don't believe your client. I think you're full of it. I think there's too many lawsuits in the world. I think you're the problem. You're the reason ladders are so long because there's so many warnings on them. You're the reason prices are so high. You're the reason why, X, Y, and Z. And that's in regular jury selection school. You go, as a lawyer, that's the person you just don't even ask that guy a question because you're afraid of them poisoning the well and all that kind of stuff. In my theory, I look for that guy. He's my best friend. I need that in order to demonstrate that I'm a genuine human being and that I'm going to be credible and that I'm not going to lie to you and I'm not going to run away from all those problems in the case. I need that nightmare juror. So if that's true, I also need every problem I have in every case that I have. I need the problem because the problem becomes an opportunity to be credible. Does that make sense?
It's an incredible opportunity, I think, that you can turn around in your favor. And I think all it takes is just being real, being authentic, right?
It takes asking that question I talked about earlier, which how can they be 100% right and I still win? And if I can live with it long enough and figure that out, then I've got a special case that needs to be pursued, even if I've got a big, huge problem in it. Because I can get up and then honestly say, folks, I've got this horrible problem in the case. And people look at you and go, oh, why are you in this case? Are you interested in knowing why I'm in the case? Would you stick around? I'm actually a pretty good lawyer. Stick around, I'll tell you. And then they go, yeah, I'd kind of like to know. And if you're a credible human being, they'll stick around and they want to know. So, it's an incredible, I still love my profession, even though I'd like to strangle parts.
You're always criticizing it, right?
I'd love to strangle parts of it to death, like to disappearance. But I think we are what stands between justice and injustice so frequently that for real people, regular people, just normal, everyday people, there's no way that they could compete from a power perspective with powerful entities like governments and businesses that are big and huge and can afford very elaborate defenses. And so it's lawyers who are willing to represent the little person, the regular lawyer.
I mean, but that's the foundation of your profession, is to serve others, to bring justice. And so I think something we all have to do in this field is to really look within and provide the justice, carry out what we were set out to do from the beginning, right? And not get distracted by all of the details and and the ego, right, that gets in the way so much.
When we fail, which we will, when those things creep in,
Yeah.
to recognize them as early as possible, to own them as fully and completely as possible, and to put them back in their place as completely as possible, because we will fail. That's part of the human thing, is we will. And I think it goes way beyond the lawyer. I mean, look at your experience with law, and you and I met at one of the programs that we used to be at live all the time, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 30 times a year around the country.
Yeah.
And you see all the different people who are part of what we do. It's not just lawyers, it's people in the financial world, it's people in the medical world, it's people in the illustration world, it's people, you name it, and law touches upon it, right? And so every one of those fields, those adjuncts, have an opportunity to either be credible or not credible. And think of all the people in your field, specifically the areas that you've been involved in, these financial things. Some of the people you look at and you go, gosh, just anybody but them.
Yeah.
Not,
you see people from all walks of life. It's really interesting. And it's entertaining in many ways,
it's horrifying.
Very
It makes me cringe. It
can be horrifying. It could be entertaining depending on how many drinks you've had for the day. But
no doubt.
So Joe, I do want to touch on the business of law, because I think it's important. Other than being a lawyer, you also have to be somewhat of a business savvy person, because you're running a business, right? It's ultimately a business, and money does matter in this life, in this reality we live in. So my experience has been that lawyers don't always have the best judgment with money and business and running a practice where 95% of your time goes into working up cases and litigating, and so running the business really isn't a priority, and so things can go wrong very quickly. What is your experience in terms of running the business side of your practice? You run a very successful practice. Tell me a little bit about that balance that you strike.
Well, I'm probably the worst example. I don't consider myself to be very business savvy. I think I agree with you, by the way, because there's some really good lawyers who their ability to be the best lawyer that they can be is curtailed because of the poor decisions that they put themselves in.
Right.
Where they're, living above their means, they get themselves overextended, and there's a lot of the very same things that we're talking about, in terms of just who you are as a person, end up controlling some of that stuff too. I really do believe that if you go out with the intention every day of doing good in the world, that everything else will ultimately take care of itself. Right. But that's only true to a certain level. I know that, because I could, if I either have some really bad breaks, which can happen, lawyers in my field, what a lot of people focus on how much their fees are, but lawyers in my field usually have to carry their own costs in cases. So when you represent real regular people, they can't afford to pay you as you go.
Right.
So you sometimes will have hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars of your money you're responsible for, tied up in the expenses of cases.
Mhm.
And if things don't go well, you go lose a big case, not only that don't get paid for it in fees, but you've lost all those expenses.
Mhm.
That can become problematic. So I think that I think that the what I would say about the business of the practice of law is that you have to decide a little bit about whether you're going to concentrate more on being a lawyer or being a business person.
Yeah.
I think people who run more volume-based practices have to be better business people in one way, because their systems have to be better in order to manage the volume. And for me, I went in the opposite direction. I'm a very low volume shop,
Yeah.
so I can concentrate a lot of my efforts on a single case.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of risk tied up in that case. So if I'm only concentrating on, let's say 5 cases, and I go lose one of those cases, I have thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up in it. It's going to hurt a lot more. Thankfully, I don't make a practice of losing very frequently, but it does happen. Anybody who does this for a living
Knows that risk is there. Yeah.
That's right. So I think at the end of the day, I think it is an important part. We've been talking about how do you handle sort of the emotional aspects of these cases. I think there's an emotional aspect to the business as well. How are you going to be? Are you going to be somebody who wants to be on your own? Do you want to team up with other people and share the risk? Do you have the business acumen? Do you need to hire a business manager? A lot of firms now, and very smartly, I think, end up hiring a financial person, sort of a CFO, if you will, to manage their.
I think it's the best thing a firm can do is have a CFO.
I think it's a great thing to do for many firms. I think you have to be really careful that you get somebody who you really have trust in, and you still have to build in today's day and age, checks and balances. I know great lawyers have been taken terribly advantage of.
Right.
And so you still, as a professional, you're charged with knowing what's going on in your financial existence in your firm. So in today's day of fraud and et cetera, you have to go through the process of building protections in along the way. And for me personally, that meant putting people who have that kind of background into positions where they could protect me. And so
I think also, you can't completely just give it to someone else to take care of. I think you need to spend time to understand how the business is running, what the overhead is, what the expenses are, how, you're doing, how did you do the past 2 or 3 years? Was there any cash flow issues? How can you adjust going forward? And if you don't have time to obviously stay on top of it day to day, have somebody there. But also, you have to check in with the business, right? You need to know.
You do it. I didn't want to for a long time, and I'm not going to get into the details of this, but
Yeah.
I was the victim of some pretty serious fraud that happened. Thankfully, it didn't involve any of my clients. It was personal funds, but it happened largely because I was, quote, too busy to manage it. And what happens is you become vulnerable if you don't take a part of your existence and create safety nets for yourself somehow.
Yeah.
And whether it's, I agree with what you're saying. You can't entirely divorce yourself from the process.
No.
You have to have checks and balances. And at the very, very least, you have to have a system of checks and balances, and you have to be involved in that in some way.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think we can't have those conversations enough. I do a lot of capital deployment in my line of work, and so I see the cash flow issues that law firms have because, you all eat what you kill. And
Right.
So some years are great and some years are not great. and it's really a roller coaster ride. And so one of the things that I always preach to law firms is to create consistency in their cash flow. Make sure that, you know, if you're only going to take a handful of cases, that you better be really sure and very confident in your ability to resolve those cases. If not, you have to diversify your, you know, how many cases you're working on at a given time, the different practice areas, bringing in talent, and making sure that you constantly have different sources of revenue coming in. But it's between the working on yourself and working on your lawyer skills and the business, it's a lot. I think it's a lot, right? So you said to me earlier that you take time to work at different things depending on what's going on. What are you currently working on right now? Is there an area of focus that you're spending more time on than usual?
Well, I would say a couple things. One, you know, I mentioned to you sort of offline that a little over a year ago, I made a decision to kind of reclaim my health.
Yes.
Because I woke up in October or so of 2019 and I was in what felt like the worst shape of my life. I mean, it was like I'd walk up a flight of stairs and I'd be winded, and you know, I was heavier than I'd ever been. I didn't feel good, you know, ... And so I made a commitment starting January 1st of 2020, that I was going to kind of recapture. I actually made the commitment before that, but I started, you know, kind of a New Year's resolution that included getting a concierge doctor and starting to really kind of focus on my blood work and, you know, all those kind of things, and focus on my health. And, you know, I think if you count the days, I think it's been 420 days today.
Wow.
421 since that January 1st of 2020. I haven't missed a day on the Peloton bike during that time. I've lost about 40 pounds. My blood work is good. You know, all that kind of stuff. So that's been a big focus. But I think that there's some other lessons that I've learned along the way. I believe a lot in this 80-20 rule. So I believe that if lawyers would look at their existence, they would find that about 88, you know, they're making 80% of their money on 20% of their cases, and vice versa. They're spending 80% of their time, you know, on the wrong cases, and you know, so if you start to play with that, you start to look at, we waste, I'm not gonna say waste, but we misuse, I think, a lot of time and energy. We live from a place of fear, so we take every case, or we take too many cases because we're afraid of what might happen if we don't take them. The fear of missing out, the fear of income loss. When the truth is, if you know, at least it's been true for me and many other lawyers I know, that as you start to restrict what you become involved in, you end up making more money. You also work just as hard. I'm not gonna, it's a fallacy to think that if you were to drop that 80% that I talked about and just focused on the 20, guess what happens? That 20 becomes 100, and you still spend all your time working, but now you're working on that 20% of cases. But what happens is your income goes up, which is counterintuitive.
Better, yeah.
You know, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But what I'm focused on is I'm still focused very much on living an honest life. I'm still focused on, you know, I'm rereading the 4 agreements right now. I'm still focused on, you know, using things to get out of whatever. I believe that too frequently I get stuck, and stuck can take a lot of different forms. So I'm always looking for ways that I can get out of stuck.
Unstuck.
Unstuck, yeah. Call it out of stuck. I should probably call it unstuck. You know, it's because a lot of times for me, it's just finding a different perspective.
Yeah.
Something that breaks me out of the mold. I'm trying to focus a lot more on my relationships with my wife and with my children, and with several friends who are really important to me. So those are the kind of focuses right now. And I'm still, you know, spending a lot of time trying to be the best human being lawyer who I can be. So for me, that involves a lot of teaching, as you know. I get as much. It's a selfish endeavor. People always say, wow, you spend so much time doing this for everybody else. I go, yeah, but I get a lot out of it myself. So
Yeah.
don't be fooled.
So speaking about teaching, I want to get a little bit into the Academy of Truck Accident Attorneys.
Yeah.
Tell me about why did you want to take that on, and on top of everything you had going on? You're a co-founder. How did it start? And what is it today? So people can learn a little bit.
Yeah, I'm super proud of the Academy. So the Academy was born out of lots of conversation between me and my cohort, Michael Leizerman, who over the years, we saw a lot of things happen.
Hi, Michael.
We were two of the very, very early people in the country who had dedicated our practices to handling truck crash cases. And what we saw, we didn't really like. We saw a lot of people who, we saw a lot of, there were other organizations out there, one in particular that really was not really, we didn't like the way that organization was going. We thought that there was a need. Michael Leizerman and I both share the belief that what we do, although we're taking care of one client at a time or one case at a time, it's really about highway safety at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And we both feel this very, very strong desire to kind of leave the world better than we found it. And we both share the belief that, there's no way we could handle all the truck cases in the country, even if we wanted to. We thought that the cases were being mishandled, being treated just as kind of big car wreck cases, and people didn't really understand how to do the cases. So we decided that we were going to really teach people without an agenda of getting into somebody's case, without an agenda of selling marketing, without an agenda of building big programs that we would have, hundreds or, of vendors come to at $5,000 a pop and make, money on it. And so we put this together as a nonprofit. We wrote the bylaws in a way that neither he nor I could ever take money out of the organization other than the money that was the seed money to get it started. We hired an executive director, and we set out to do a few things. We set out to really provide the best educational programs that we could, not focused on him or me, but really pulling the best folks together from around the country and teaching for real, without holding back, without an agenda. And we did a few other things in the process. We wanted to also do something about, in today's day and age, there's, anybody can be anything on the internet, these days, right? So we would see people who were marketing themselves as sort of the truck people, once that became in vogue, that really had no business doing that from our perspective in terms of their background, experience, training. So we created a fully third-party vetted system. We went on a 4-year journey with the American Bar Association to get truck accident law recognized as a true specialty within our field. We helped the National Board of Trial Advocacy create that program. We helped get it approved by the American Bar Association. It's now a fully it's a fully
it's the trucking accident seminar.
So it's become great. And I'm just before I was writing something for our newsletter just before I got on this with you, and talking about how we have as an organization, we have changed the way that truck crash litigation happens. We have changed it to be much more honest, straightforward, and really dedicated to improving highway safety. And
that's the book you're writing, correct?
The book I'm writing right now is a book on standards of care that's going to be directed toward law enforcement.
Law enforcement, yeah, that's correct.
There's just kind of a hole in the training there. So
yeah,
I'm almost done with the book. I think I've said that for too long, so I have to go and actually
get it done.
Yeah, so there's a lot. The Academy is kind of a legacy move for both Michael Leizerman and I. I'm super proud of we now have initiatives to we've cherry picked the things that are most dangerous out there from the trucking side, and we're kind of looking to put ourselves out of business. I mean, I'd love to, if we could, if we could twinkle our nose and make it so that trucks were using the technology that's available now and not doing some of the things that are causing the most significant crashes. Then, so we're out there trying to get these things changed to lower the number of serious accidents there are. And, it's kind of counterintuitive. Why would people who make their money on truck crashes be out there trying to minimize truck crashes? But wouldn't that be great if we could put ourselves out of business? So
it's very noble work. It's
very proud that it's totally nonprofit. Very proud that we've been able to support and encourage different lawyers from different walks of life, male, female, we got a diverse group. We actively encourage diversity. We actually look for opportunities truck crash law, as you might imagine, is historically been a pretty male-dominated
business,
and frankly, a white male-dominated, area. We've looked for opportunities to change that, to enhance diversity within the area, and it's catching on, which is great. And so, it gives us an opportunity to really do good in the world. And so, it's what's cool about it is we're doing great things on the plaintiff side, but it's also being recognized on the defense side. I'm being asked more and more to present to trucking associations. In the last year and a half, I've presented to the American Trucking Association, the Defense Research Institute. I just got done a couple of weeks ago presenting to the Michigan Trucking Association, and that was probably the 10th or 11th defense, industry organization that I've presented to in the last couple of years.
Wow.
So I think we're making a difference, and it's nice. I saw a podcast the other day, or a webcast the other day, where somebody sent it to me, and they said, go look at 62 minutes in or something, and so I looked at it, and the guy was saying, well, let's talk about this enemy of our profession, the Joe Freed. And the other guy said, well, let me tell you about Joe Freed. He might be our adversary, but he's doing this the right way. And so, I got positive accolades, and I wasn't even there to insist upon it. So that was nice.
I mean, look, the fact that you can sort of go on the other side and make friends, right? And play nice, I think that says a lot, because this is for the overall well-being of our communities and our society. This is not personal. This is not about the ego. This is not about the fees. There is more. I mean, although I do feel like, I guess my natural next question is, trucking accidents are probably going to go away in the next decade or so.
I'd love for that to be true.
Don't you think, with self-driving trucks? I mean, isn't that sort of where we're headed?
I don't think it'll happen. I think it's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen within the next 10 years. But I mean, the industry is changing every day. I mean, as we get better and better, more and more people in the industry are adopting, collision avoidance technology that, brakes trucks automatically, that stops them from improper lane changes, that, and that monitors drivers real time, so that companies get notifications about bad driving behavior much earlier. Those things are changing the industry right now. Mm-hmm. So it's getting better as more and more companies adopt that kind of technology, which is a lot of what we're after these days to make happen. So yeah, we're changing the industry, I think, for the better, and the industry is changing to reflect, we get beat up a lot for creating big dollar verdicts. They call them nuclear verdicts. My response to that is I'm proud of it, not because it hurts the industry, but because it motivates the industry to say, what, if you don't do this and you get tagged with a big crash, it's going to cost you a lot of money. You may as well go.
Goldberg is coming after you.
I'm coming after you. I'll be nice about it. We'll cry together in the deposition, but you're going to pay big money at the end.
Joe Freed, I miss these conversations. I appreciate you coming on this podcast and helping me be me, because I just couldn't think of somebody else better than you to start this podcast with. So I appreciate you beyond anything I can say in words.
Well, I appreciate you back. I know where your heart is and where your intentions are. And like I said at the beginning, I can't think of anybody better. If the goal here is to kind of get behind the lawyer BS and let's start talking a conversation that you asked. Why are we doing this? Why don't we have more of these conversations? Well, isn't that what you're doing right now? Is let's start being humans together.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens, because the alternative hasn't worked out so well for us, has it? Right? So
yeah, I'm hoping more lawyers are going to come on the podcast and be able to really speak freely and honestly, because I think it's necessary to have these conversations, and it deepens the industry, it deepens us as people, it deepens our friendships. And this is what I think it's all about. This is like the best part of my job, is to be able to grow with my peers.
well, I'm super proud of you, and I at the same time, I can't wait to get back to where we can all be enjoying
Me too.
the groups that we used to be a part of that still remain very special to me in my thoughts. So appreciate you again. Have a great evening, and we'll talk again soon.
We'll be in touch. Thank you so much for coming on. And to everyone who has tuned in, please subscribe on my YouTube channel and on iTunes for more podcasts. Thank you.
See you later.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you are notified whenever a new episode is posted. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, this is Mirena Umizaj, bringing heart into the business of law.